What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Deadly Draw podcast. Just Rai and Dave today. Nick had some stuff going on, a couple baseball games with the boys, so
right on.
Pretty stoked about this one, guys. We're patching in Jaredmills here to talk to him for a little bit about whitetail strategies and his new farm and kind of the acquisition of or the creation of Monsterbuck Foodplot seed and a little bit of everything that we can get out of him. So
yeah, it'll be fun to talk to him. Looking forward to it.
I know we kind of hung out on Saturday shooting bows and everything, but
that was fun.
Sunday
didn't do much. It was last Thursday. We burned that plot, got that seeded. We didn't get much rain, so I'm hoping for some more rain tomorrow to really sink that seed in good after we packed it. And gonna wait another. I went out and checked the other one. I'm gonna have to kill that some more yet before.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it needs some more. So
yeah, that canary grass or whatever it is.
I might even mow it and drag it and disc it.
Really?
I don't know. It's pretty green yet, so I might mow it and kill it, and then get that disc from Andy and try that out on the 4-wheeler, see how that works. So a couple options I'm running through my head on that last plot yet, but
yeah. Well, luckily you got time, and it looks like, looking at the 10-day, there is some decent rains coming up. Yes. It looks like, so
yeah.
If it stays true, who knows?
Yeah, right. But anywho.
But yeah, we're gonna jump in here and get Jared linked up and catch up with him. What's up, buddy?
What's going on? You guys hear me all right?
How you doing? Yep.
Good. I'm good. How about you guys?
Good. How you doing?
Awesome. Hang on one second. All right. I should be good now.
Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to do this. I know you're a busy fella.
Yeah, I think we all are. It's crazy. Like, oh yeah, I can find an hour to carve out, and then all of a sudden it's like, where's the time go? There's just never enough hours in the day, it seems like.
How's the new farm going?
Good, man. It's a little further away than my old farm, and it's about as far as I'd want to go as far as like being able to work on it as much as I like to work on them. But it's good. It's coming along. I'm going to try to get over there this week and at least get some fall plots prepped. I won't seed anything quite yet, but get some spots because there's no existing open areas or plots or anything. So everything is a first year plot. So you guys know how that is. It's about triple the amount of work this year.
Dealing with that right now myself. So.
Yeah. So it's good. It's fun. I like creating stuff from scratch, but the time is certainly eaten up.
Are you killing, tilling the whole nine, or kind of just tilling? And
a little bit of both. Some of it's going to depend on the weather too. Here, I was looking just a little bit ago, starting Wednesday of this week, it's chances of rain for the foreseeable future. We've got not too much rain, but more than enough for sure. And so typically you have a whole lot of time to get things mowed and sprayed and tilled. If I could do it on an ideal timeline, I would probably spray it, till it, pack it, let it green up a little bit, and then spray it one more time before seeding, just to really eliminate all weed competition. But that's like best case scenario, because that obviously takes the longest. There's a lot of steps there. So some of them I may just spray and seed and not even break ground. Some I'm definitely going to till, but I might just till and seed and not worry about, typically in my experience, if you can get rain right away, most of these better brassica varieties outcompete the weeds in most cases. It somewhat depends on the different blends and how, what you have for cereal grains in there and stuff like that. But, for the most part, I don't get too much weed competition. Grass is usually worse than broadleaf weeds in most cases on this. But, this time of year, typically these faster growing brassica varieties do a pretty good job of outcompeting. They canopy out pretty quick and shade out competition.
So when you say you're starting those new plots, is that just native grasses that you're killing,
It's both. There,
or did you buy in last year?
there's a
Or
little, no, I didn't close on the farm till this spring. So it's just, some of it is like brome grass. Some of it's actually that farm in some of the areas where the sunlight is better, like where some of the trees didn't do as well. Actually having some Sericea lespedeza taken over. So, I don't think this late in the year that's going to be a problem if I kill it off or disc it or mow it low for that matter. But there's certain areas where that's outcompeted the brome. Those are probably the two main things I'm dealing with on that farm, are those two species and in the open areas that I'm planting right now. There's some timbered spots where I'm cutting down some of the half-dead ash trees that have some of your more common broadleaf weeds they're growing up, within a forest setting.
Okay. Was that, if I remember right, wasn't part of that the bigger open area? I just caught up with the first video kind of your walkthrough that you did on it.
Yeah,
Was that top section, was that in CRP or something prior to you getting it, or was that?
the entire farm is in a CRP program, but it's a CP3A tree planting CRP program. So there's no native grasses. It's all planted trees. But there's some areas where the trees didn't grow as well, and I think it's due to the brome grass because it's areas that are walnut heavy. And I think the original landowner that planted the trees about 30 years ago didn't do a good enough job of controlling the grass when they planted those, and the walnuts don't like that grass competition. Most of the other trees did well in those areas, but it's just certain areas where I think maybe the soil was a little, I don't know if it was just a little lower quality in those spots because some of those walnut trees look like they're 20 years behind the other trees, even though they're planted at the exact same time. But I think it was that brome grass competition. There's some really good walnut trees on the farm. It's just certain areas where the grass really took over. So I'm focusing on those areas, and I'm focusing on the ash tree areas where you have a lot of, obviously the emerald ash borer. You have a lot of half dead ash trees that are letting a lot of sunlight, or they're going to be dead soon anyway. So I might as well cut them down now. I'd actually made one really, and I don't know how much you want to cover on the actual podcast, but I made one really cool one that I'm excited about. There was a section of all ash trees, about half to three quarters of an acre, and I cut them down. They're big trees, but I cut them down and I left almost probably 18 to 20 inches of stump. And so it's going to basically be a mineral stump plot. So I have all these ash tree stumps that are just going to, throw a crazy amount of shoots in them and have brassicas throughout. So it's going to be a smorgasbord of food within a little half acre, secluded, great access, great tree stands, trees, and it'll be kind of a little bit of an experiment, but I think it'll be a really, really cool spot. A lot of food.
cool.
So prior to you getting, did you have kind of some insight on that property before you went and purchased it, or was it just something that happened to come up and then you wanted to take a look at it basically, or looked at, how do you dissect that or make that decision?
Yeah, man, it's super interesting. I feel pretty fortunate that I was able to get it, but it was on the open market for 6 months, and they received two offers, and both were from me. I offered once early on, and they didn't counter. Um, and then after, it was like in September, I walked it, put an offer in, and they didn't counter. It was too low. And then after the season, it sat there for another 4 or 5 months. So January, February, I went and walked it again, put another offer in. They accepted it. So it sat there
Awesome.
for a while with no movement, no attention or anything like that. And I think they were a little more willing to work with me at that point. So it was super interesting. I don't understand why it got overlooked. It might have been the timing, just a little bit of uncertainty within the world and the market and all that stuff during that time frame. and the other thing too that I think scared people away is I told you it was all CRP. That CRP contract expires at the end of 2026. And so it goes from really, really good income because it's $33,000 plus annual income right now. It goes from that to zero. And so I think that scared people. Like I think most people just look at that from a surface level standpoint and like, yeah, that gets hard to, which it does, it gets hard to pencil out if there's no income to help support and help pay that. But I looked at it as an opportunity to when that contract does expire. Now I can go in and create my own income acres. I can clear out some tillable acres the way I want to shape the fields, the most ideal spots for access, the better soils, all that type of stuff, and create, a really good 50-50 type farm. I'll probably go a little heavy on the timber and habitat side. It may be more like a 70-30 or 75-25, but regardless, I'm still going to be able to create some really good income on it through the farm acres and then potentially re-enroll those into CRP at some point. So I don't know. I think most people probably just didn't think it through on the level that deep. They just saw good income to zero and hard to pencil out at that point.
Sure. Yeah, that'd be a little bit scary when you're seeing numbers like that to nothing, because pretty much that's almost self-sustaining for a while, until that contract is
Oh
up.
yeah, it pays the loan right now. I mean, I'm actually gonna be for these first 2 years, I'm gonna be getting paid to own that farm. It's just it goes to zero at the end of 2026, and then you just have to be strategic about it from that standpoint. So, but I think it's super super unique and rare to find an opportunity where you get to go in and do that. From typically it's the other way around where you're just working with what you have, but now I get to go in and literally carve out fields where I want them. And I think that's going to be super cool. I think it's just going to, the potential is limitless on that farm with how it will hunt and just the amount of deer it will hold. It's great habitat already and really good cover. I love that age of trees, that 30-year-old tree. It's not great this time of year, but once September hits, October, and through the rest of the season, it's a magnet. Deer love the thermal cover that those 30-ish year old trees provide. It'll hold a ton of deer.
Awesome. Were the prior owners, did they hunt it?
I think they did a little bit. There wasn't evidence of much. There weren't like blinds. Not There's a couple like ladder stands kind of randomly placed. Not really food plots or anything like that. I think they hunt a little bit, but they just treat it as overall rec farm with fishing, walking around, walking trails, that type of stuff.
Cool.
Yeah,
So I assume you got some cameras out there already and
I do. I have a hand.
picked out yet that you're looking at, or
No, man, I have a handful of cameras out, but it's like I said, it for whatever reason, historically, every farm that I've hunted like this, the deer just do not like it this time of year. I just think there's almost too much thermal cover. There's not as much wind movement through those young, thick trees. Like it's just not the type of habitat they want to be in during the summer. I've hunted this type of farm of like planted trees for 12 plus years now, this style, and they've all been the same. It's been remarkable how consistent that has been. It's like you don't have all the neighbors have the deer during the summer, but it's a good thing because I don't need them in the summer. I'm good. you know
right?
I'll take them in the fall.
Same situation going on. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
a lot of oaks, a lot of big oaks, and
yeah.
rolling hills. So yeah, I have the same scenario in a sense.
Yeah, and obviously I'm in the middle of ag country, so a lot of these bucks are just living in a waterway in the middle of a cornfield right now. It doesn't matter if I had better habitat; they just want to be where they want to be this time of year.
Great. Where they're not banging their velvet.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
So going back to planning, if you have a preferred food source. I mean, I know you probably focus a lot on, just browse that the farm is offering as well, but what would be your preferred food source, once you get that established and how you get it set up the way you want it?
For like any time of the year.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, like your summer, what do you want for summer to feed, and what are you looking for like a kill plot?
Yeah, so I would say my main answer would kind of cover both of those, and it has evolved to this over the years, but it's a combination of clover and chicory. I just think that that is so hard to beat in terms of its overall attraction and nutrition throughout the entire year. If you're looking big picture, how do I keep more deer on my property for longer periods of time? It's got to be that. I just think that there's just too much, a lot of tonnage, as we know, but the nutrition levels are great. The attraction level is great. Relatively easy to grow. There's maintenance, of course, involved in clover and chicory, but it's one of the first things to come out of winter, and basically is a really good food source the entire time, except for maybe a month or two in the dormancy of the winter. And lesser quality clover can be dormant during the hot summer months too. But that's where one, quality clover comes in. It doesn't shut down as easily as some of the lesser quality clover. But two, the chicory really thrives in that situation. It's deep tap rooted, so it does really well in heat and drought. It keeps on providing really good food, even this time of year. We're entering the dog days of summer, and these high heat, typically dry, but we've been getting good rain this year. But the chicory is so good in terms of that. Just super high in protein. Everything needs that protein, the entire herd, and especially this time. If people don't think about, and I was in this category too, and so I started really utilizing the clover and chicory. But during the summer, I think we tend to think everything's green. There's so much food, there's so much forage available. But as we start entering this later summer time frame, the food quality drops off pretty significantly. Even though it looks like there's still a ton of green out there, those plants are maturing. It's like, it's almost like a maturing clover plot too. But the more mature those plants get, the less forage or quality forage actually exists for the deer. So that's where, maintaining these clover chicory plots can really stand out. I've just seen a difference even in the last 2 weeks, a huge uptake in activity on those plots, as the better food starts dropping off in some of the other natural browse situations.
and that's do you have like a multi-climate planted there now, or is this on a different
Yep,
farm, or is
I have
this?
two multi-year plots on that farm right now. They're both first year, so they're still starting to get established. I planted them probably late May, early June, I think is when I seeded them. So they're getting the deer are in them nonstop all day, but they're nothing compared to what they will be next year. Second year clover plots always seem to be the best years for them, or compared to the first year anyway. So, but they're going to be a good food source this fall. Kind of getting back to your question, I do love, like, I still love the clover chicory plots all fall, like I said. But I do think deer preferences change. So I like having the diversity. That's where I like to have like a high quality brassica blend, to where you're hitting some of those changing preferences. You don't have those hot and cold periods where deer are off preferring something else. Oftentimes I'll do half and half plots where you have half clover chicory and half brassica blend. That way it's, obviously there's a reason that plot's there. Maybe it's the only plot only place you could plant it, but most of the time it's because strategically you can hunt it. So, focus on maximizing the time that the deer are actually utilizing that spot is a good thing. And you can do that by offering diversity in what's planted there.
Do you see them making that shift, like in preference, or do they just kind of bounce back and forth in
I
it?
try to monitor it. I think it's really tough though, because um, I don't have any science to back this up, but I do think deer are individuals just like people in terms of what they prefer. And so it's not like you can watch the entire herd hit one spot and then all of a sudden it's cold and there's no deer. Like I think there's some deer that prefer certain things at certain times and other deer don't. And then of course deer are naturally, grazers. They'll go eat clover and chicory for 15 minutes and then they'll move over to the other half in Nebraska's and they may bounce back and forth the entire night. So, I think it's sometimes hard to put a blanket answer on, when those cutoffs are, when they're switching, that type of stuff.
So going back to the clover chicory plots, do you look at them like overseeding into them as well into the fall, or do you just wait and frost seed them next spring?
I don't do it in the fall very often unless I really have some open areas that I'm wanting to try to get a head start on filling in. I typically wait more for the spring time to do that. If your clover plot's struggling going into the fall, I think I would, you know, more lean towards supporting with some cereal grains like some oats and rye, maybe a combination of those, and those are gonna, you'll have some of that come back in the spring. It's basically just going to act as a nurse crop to help that clover along. And you can overseed clover back into that in the spring and terminate the cereal grain, terminate the rye later on. But I usually don't even, when I do that, I don't terminate the rye until, like closer to June, because it does provide good fawning cover and it still is acting like helping the clover crop in the spring months too. So, there's, you guys know this, but there's so many different ways you can look at these plots, so many different things you can do. But that's just one of the things that has tend to work better for me over the years, rather than seeding the clover in the fall.
Right on. So, I mean, obviously, I know you're going to be busy and you're going to be spending a lot of time on the new farm. Do you have any trips planned, or are you going to hunt out of state at all? I know last year you got up into Minnesota a little ways,
Yeah.
or does it just depend on harvest in your area?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to leave Iowa, obviously, when you get into the heat of the season, especially when you can typically keep hunting. As a landowner, you get 3 buck tags in Iowa. And so it's very rare for me to fill all 3, but at least I can still be out there chasing a buck. But I like to focus the out-of-state hunts early. I did draw a Montana elk tag this year. Still trying to figure out where actually I want to go. It's just a general tag, um, but I hadn't drawn that tag in like 4 years, so I'm excited about that to get back out west chasing elk. So that'll be likely September hunt, but that's also the time I like to go to Minnesota and Kentucky. Those are probably the only 2 states I'll hunt this year in addition to Iowa for whitetail. Um, Kentucky, I have historically gone like the first week of September whenever it opens down there. And the Minnesota is more one where I kind of base it off of. I do like hitting that September timeframe in Minnesota too, but that one I'm more likely to make trips, during the late October or during the rut or even late season. I've hunted up there late season as well. So that one just kind of what deer are showing up and how the hunting is in Iowa. But for sure, Kentucky in September, it's been kind of an annual trip for me. Um, really like going down there. It's fun having at least a chance at a velvet buck. It depends on almost the day they open, but it seems like opening day, it's almost 50-50 whether a buck's going to be shed or still have full velvet. So you're trying to get on one as soon as you possibly can.
When you're going over there, are you hitting public mainly, or do you have some access to some private over there, or a
Kentucky,
little bit of both?
yeah, yep.
Yeah.
So I have a buddy that I've hunted with a couple different buddies down there, basically just permission ground that they have or that they own. I try to help out as much as possible on the land management side, at least from a distance. It's hard to make too many trips down there, but helping out with what food plots to plant or how to set up properties and stuff like that, just to try to put in a little work. And I'm not one of those guys that wants everything to be completely teed up and be hands off. I like to at least have some hand in the properties and the hunting that I'm going to be taking a part in. So fortunately, my buddies that I hunt with down there are super interested in the land management side and bettering the properties and willing to put in the work. So it's been a lot of fun. It's been cool to watch those properties transform and watch the deer utilize them more and stuff like that. So it's been fun. And in Kentucky, man, they have some quality deer. Like it's not like you're going to hunt small deer down there. There's potential to hunt some really big deer in Kentucky.
That's cool. So are you guys baiting when you go there, or are you just focusing on food sources mainly, or food plots,
I
or?
like the food plot game just because that's what I know. The baiting thing, I just don't understand it. Like I've never had that like light bulb moment where I've seen a mature buck consistently use a bait pile in any of those states, and which obviously I know it happens, but for me, I see more use out of a food plot. I just think it's a little bit more natural. It's not as like it's not as tight of a restricted area for them. So from a mature buck standpoint, I think I don't know. Again, this is an outsider perspective, not having really participated in baiting, but I think it's a better option, at least in my experience. Getting them used to the food plots, and it's just again, it's kind of like the clover chicory thing we were talking about. The more you can provide something longer than just a couple months out of the hunting season or a couple weeks out of the hunting season in terms of a bait pile, the more I think you're going to get a mature buck using that type of stuff. They're just going to increase their comfort in that area. So I think it's more effective that way.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the whole, like you talked about before, the whole herd is benefiting from it, not just that one deer that you might be after. You got
Right.
30, 40 deer in there eating, and fawns and
Right.
does and everything else. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I like I said, fortunately, my buddies down there that I hunt with, especially my one buddy that I've hunted with the past few years, he's all about, the food plots, and he loves, tinkering with different blends and trying this and this spot and those half and half plots that we were talking about. And so that's part of the fun with food plotting in general is the experimentation of it. And I've been lucky that he's enjoyed that just as much as I do.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
So, getting back to like mature animals, I know you've had the opportunity. I haven't had the opportunity to kill anything 5 or older, but
This
coming,
year I'm looking at it, so
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
I
kind of
mean,
excited about that. Yeah, I've been chasing this one for 3 years now, so
Dang. That's
hopefully.
awesome. How
but going to having history with a certain deer, and targeting a certain deer. How do you? And I'm not asking you to put out all your secrets, but how do you go about? I mean, pulling that off and the successful access and the multiple hunts. I mean, I know there's so many different aspects that are tied into it, but it seems like you got it pretty well dialed in now to where you're picking the perfect day to be in the perfect spot in a lot of situations.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I still get beat plenty by these deer. I mean, and that's a good thing. Ultimately, that's I don't want it to ever be any other way. But I think if I was to summarize what's worked best for me is you have to treat these deer like a different species. You have to treat these mature animals not the same as you do going on any other deer hunt. If you're going out and just sit in a spot trying to kill whatever first deer walks by, doe, buck, doesn't matter, that's a certain type of hunting strategy. But going and trying to target a mature buck, they just don't think or act the same as the rest of the herd. And I think the sooner you realize that, the better off you're going to be in terms of drawing up a strategy to get on them. It's oftentimes not the most used trail that you're going to kill them on. You find a beat down trail, and I think the tendency is like, man, this is a great spot. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's because it's a pinch, and every deer has to go through that spot. But I've just seen so many times where you'll sit there for an afternoon hunt, for example, you'll watch deer after deer after deer after deer do the same thing, enter the field in the same spot, do the same thing, and then that mature buck at last light does nothing like the rest of the herd. And I've seen that enough to know that you just have to treat them differently. And it's not always an easy answer, obviously, but the more you can learn about them, you can typically find some tendencies that they have that you can exploit. But again, it's typically not something that the other deer are doing. So that's how I would probably summarize it. I know that's very, very high level, and we can potentially try to dive into specifics. But just the biggest piece of advice I can have is just don't treat them like an everyday whitetail deer. They truly are a different species in my mind. Just the way they behave and the things they do, and just how they calculate their movements. It's just a different level of behavior.
Yeah.
I know.
You're probably
Just
realizing
when
that.
you got one figured out, and it's like, oh, not today.
Yeah. No,
But again, like you said, that's part of the game too,
it
right?
is.
I mean,
It's a great thing. It's why we keep coming back, and I want. Obviously, I interact with a lot of people through messages and things like that, and I wish that I could bring everybody along and on one of those, just because I think it's something every hunter should experience, should get the chance to experience sometime, because I think it expedites your learning curve. It expedites, your um, just your journey as a hunter. In terms of just how you overcome challenges and the way you think about things. It's amazing how much you can learn from those individual bucks if you're open to it. That's a big part of it too. You have to, almost take a step back and think about why did he do this on this day, on these conditions. Not just see it happen and move on to the next day, but think about the why behind it. And a lot of times you can figure out little things to help you get on them that way too.
And that's what I was gonna ask too about, because the one last year, that was your first sit in that particular spot, wasn't it? Or after that
It was
particular
actually
year?
second. Yep. I hunted their opening day, and then again on October 7th is when I killed him. So it was the second sit, yeah. But it was, that was the first time I had really hunted. I knew of that deer the previous year, but that was the first time I was actually hunting him.
And that was your because you accessed along a creek bed, correct? Or in a partially in a creek
Yep.
bed on the way up there.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you? I mean, obviously, I know thermals pull toward waterways and stuff like that, but I mean, how do you just draw that plan up, get in there, execute it, and it just came together.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
That one made me look good because it worked out to perfection. It doesn't happen enough like that, obviously. Uh, but that was like the picture perfect scenario. As we're talking about mature deer, it was a picture perfect scenario to, like, illustrating what a mature buck looks for. He had every single thing to his advantage, almost every single thing, except for where the one tree I was in, basically, I was far enough away from him where he was coming in the field that, there was no chance of me spooking him. He came out 100+ yards away. But where he eventually wanted to get to was essentially a bowl. And so I've seen so many times where they find those spots because they have the advantage all the way around them. It's not just wind in their face. It's all those thermals dropping in that spot. And it's not just for danger either. A lot of it's for danger, especially that time of year. They're checking things out to make sure it's safe, but they also like to just know what's going on. It seems like from a herd standpoint, what other bucks are around, what about the does, and especially as you start getting later in October, checking for that first hot doe. It just seems like those spots, if they have that thermal and swirling wind situation to their advantage, you can almost guarantee that's a spot where they're going to feel pretty comfortable using in daylight, obviously, especially, but just using often anyways. And that's what I saw. I had a camera there probably since, I would say, August. Just because I knew it was a good spot, just with everything coming together there. And one thing, I don't remember if I talked about it in the video or not, but one thing I thought was really interesting with that deer, he was clearly the most dominant deer in the area, but I would get just glimpses of him during the summer, like the June, July, even into August timeframe. He would walk by the camera at a distance, and I'd have a mock scrape set up, and he'd walk by, in the background, kind of look at it and keep on going. Never came and actually worked it, but once that, I think it was like the third week of September, probably somewhere in that time, third to fourth week, it was like a light switch flipped, and his behavior was completely different. He was up in the face of those scrapes. I would get good 3 and 4 year old bucks all summer long working those scrapes. So it wasn't like it was the scrape. It wasn't like it was just the time of year. It was just his personality wasn't there yet. And then when that light switch flipped, he was there nonstop, aggressively working them. You could posturing up other bucks to make sure they get out of there. You could tell he wanted that spot. That was the most advantageous spot, probably from a bedding standpoint, a feeding standpoint, a thermal standpoint, all of that. And you could tell that he was making it known that that was his area. And so when I started seeing that behavior, again, I hadn't targeted this buck before, but when I started seeing that behavior, I knew he was probably in trouble, because he was becoming really, really comfortable there. And it just made so much sense. This goes back to when I was talking about earlier. Ask yourself why. I thought about, why does he like this spot so much? And how is it playing to my advantage? And it was just, like I said, the picture perfect scenario, access wise. He had a lot to his advantage. And it just worked out perfect, just the way it played out that night. And that's a big thing too. I think people think about when it comes to hunting setups. I think we all have the tendency to try to make it bulletproof for us as hunters. We want the perfect wind advantage, making sure there's no chance of him smelling us. When typically what I've seen is your chances go way up if you're just cutting it just barely. If the wind is almost good for him, that's typically the situation where I see guys have more success. Just because, if it's completely bad for the deer, perfect for you, well, he doesn't really have a reason to use that spot. But if it's just almost right, that's when and it's risky, obviously, because wind can change just a little bit, at any time, almost on any given night. But that's typically when you can cut it super, super close. And I was, if you were to look at a map where he came out and where I was blowing my wind and my thermals, it was cutting it very, very close, but that was enough to make him feel comfortable coming in that direction.
Yeah, and then you had competition from a coyote or something as well, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't there? Those were starting to get spooky.
Yeah, there were the turkeys, and those sat there blowing for half an hour. Just, one of those things where most likely that buck was probably just sitting in the cover, like, whatever, not a big deal. But to us as hunters, we think it's the worst thing in the world, and we think the night's ruined for a little while.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So you said it's a bowl type setting, right? So and then that stand was kind of up a little bit, I guess it would be like up on the brim of the bowl along the creek bed. Is
Um,
kind of how you had it?
it was down in the bowl. So, like, if you look at a big picture terrain standpoint, all the CRP funneled down towards the stand, and then there's I won't say a big ridge, but the high bank side of the creek and the timber was behind me, and so that fell down towards the stand coming the other way. So everything kind of funneled right there to the stand and right out in front of me where the waterway is. That was kind of the base of the bowl. The only lower elevation standpoint was in the creek itself. So, my thermals as they're pulling down were going to go to the lowest spot, which was in the creek. So that was the only way I could have got busted when that wind died down. My thermals started pulling down, was if a deer was actually in the creek. Otherwise, the lowest spot was right out in front of me, which again, that's why he was so comfortable there. That was the low spot where they could pretty much smell everything at that time of night.
Man, what a setup.
It's
So
one you draw up.
other than obviously the wind and stuff, and not to go into this real deep because this could go deep. But moon phase, do you consider moon phase? Do you look at it all, or do you kind of just is what it is and pick your days regardless? Or
Yeah, I honestly don't. I'll look at it on occasion, but I typically don't apply any hunting strategy to it. Um, I just haven't seen enough over the years to think it makes a huge difference. Like there's little stuff I've seen with my hunts where, if you have a moon that's high in the sky late in the morning, I typically see really good morning activity on those days, stuff like that. But as far as being, right on with moon phase and planning hunts around it, that I just haven't gotten there yet. I think, everyone has kind of their own take and strategy on that, and I think they should. But for me, my experience just hasn't led to really dictating strategy there.
right on. Yeah, for a day a guy can get out is a day a guy
Oh
can get
yeah,
out too.
that's a huge part of it for sure. But for guys that are, the nice thing about moon phase, unlike weather, you can plan ahead around that. So if guys are trying to plan vacation or something like that, they can look at the moon phase and plan it. Whereas, weather, you can't plan that far out. But I've certainly seen way more impact from weather than I have moon phase, just in my own experience.
Sure.
Just like pressure shifts and wind shifts or,
Yep.
wind switches and stuff like that. Cold fronts,
Right.
obviously.
Yep. Weather front, and which obviously comes with barometer changes and things like that, and cloudy versus sunny days. There's a little bit to that as well. It depends on the time of the season. But yeah, I try to pay attention to that stuff a lot more. A lot more. Cold fronts, I know that's probably talked about too much, but that's still the dominant one for me.
Sure.
That was actually the 2 days I hunted that deer. We got lucky and had two cold fronts that first week of October. One on opening day, which is why I went in there, and one on October 7th. And I didn't actually go there just because of the cold front. It was kind of the wind conditions too. Cold front blows through. You oftentimes have that strong northwest wind, which is the wind direction I needed. I needed it to die down, which typically happens that day after the front. I needed to die down at the end of the evening so they would fall in the creek at the right time. So all that type of stuff. It was more about the factors of it, but a lot of those factors got caused by the cold front that blew through.
Pulled everything together for you pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
So with hunting, say 5 and older deer, in your experience, have you? And I know you said that because they have different personalities. You can even kind of even see that even like with 3-year-olds. But
Yeah.
have you seen any tendencies of them like shrinking down their home range?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some examples. I've certainly seen it with some of the properties I've helped manage. I've certainly seen it, when I used to spend a lot of time with Winky, filming him, hunting with him, we would see it with certain deer. The tough part about where I hunt, a lot of the properties I hunt, they're, I would say, relatively smaller. They're not tiny parcels, but they're on the smaller side in terms of a deer's home range. And so I don't always have the best picture or, exactly know how big that deer's core is. Just because I only know when he's on me, and that seems to, vary. Um, so I don't know that I have any like really good examples of deer that I targeted for multiple years where I saw his core area shrink as he got older, but I have certainly seen that on other people's properties that have bigger acreages. The deer's almost always on them, and then he started coring up in a smaller part of that farm.
So there you go. Hopefully that one will stick around
Yeah,
for
I
you.
got a 60.
Yeah.
So-
How old do you
but I
think?
got a lot.
How old do you think he is
I
this
think
year?
he's 5.5.
5.5. Okay.
I think he'll be 5.5 this year, and I got about 240 that surrounds me, and then I got Big Egg to my other side.
Yep.
So nobody hunts that larger piece next to me until gun season.
Yeah.
So I do get a lot of sanctuary around me that helps
Yeah.
for the early.
Yeah, I do think I think it's natural for their core range to shrink some as they get older, but I think it's also just a comfort thing. If they've made it that long, however many years in that area, there's a reason. They're safe there, they're comfortable there, they have what they need there. So I think it's natural to see some shrinking as they get older. The one thing I've certainly seen, typically it's when they're older than 5, though, at least in my case. But I've seen some of these deer that reach ages of 7 plus, get really comfortable. I think a 5-year-old deer is tough to hunt in terms of his movements, but I've seen him get so comfortable past that age to where it's almost like it goes backwards. I've seen this, well, again, hunting with Winku, I've seen this on a couple of deer that I've hunted as well. One comes to mind, what was it? It would have been 2 or 3 years ago. I was hunting a deer that I believe was 10 and a half. But he would just, it was almost, it got to the point, he still acted like a mature buck, but his daylight activity and regularity in one spot reminded you more of like a 3-year-old deer. You knew you were going to see him basically. Every time out, it was like you knew you were going to see him. And I was hunting him with a recurve, so getting within recurve range on the ground. Self-filming was a different story, but I felt pretty confident almost every time out that I was going to see him, which, kind of illustrated my point of like they just started acting like a younger deer in terms of their comfort. They weren't dumb by any means, but their activity, daylight activity, definitely increased, from years prior.
Why do you think that is?
I,
Because I've heard that in other places too. That as they get old, some people say a 7 or 8 year old is almost easier to hunt than a 4 or 5 year old.
yeah,
Just getting that comfortable
that's
maybe in
my
that
best
area.
guess. Yeah, that's my best guess. It's just a comfort thing. There may be more to it than that. There may be something biological going on. I'm not sure. But at least from my observations, my best guess is just that, they think they almost have a bulletproof feeling of being that they're in that spot for 7, 8 plus years and they've made it. It's there's naturally that feeling of comfort and being able to continue to live in that spot.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's just rare to hunt, to get a deer that age anywhere, even here in Iowa. The only deer that I've ever hunted, again, most of my properties are relatively smaller. I think it's different if you have, a couple thousand acres or at least 1,000 acres or something put together to where you have full control of that deer's core area pretty much. But for me, the deer that make it to that 7, 8, 9+ year old age are typically small antlered deer that just aren't being targeted by a lot of people, and that's the reason they make it to that age class.
So jumping over to, you had mentioned Winky a couple times. Do you guys still talk once in a while, or?
Yeah, we don't get to see each other all that often, but I did spend a couple days up at his farm last November, after I'd killed my buck. I went up and filmed him and got to see his farm and hang out with him for a couple days up there. So that was a lot of fun. We'll text every once in a while. We'll see each other at the shows, stuff like that. So yeah, we've stayed in touch.
That's pretty cool. Do you, I mean, as far as I know, you spent quite a few years with them. Do you think that you took quite a bit of knowledge from him, hunting with him in the past, or just?
Yeah, for sure. I learned a lot from him. He's obviously got a wealth of knowledge and experience. I still think we have pretty different hunting styles, though, with that being said. Just again, it's not necessarily, I think it's a byproduct mostly of the situation you're in. His farms, most of them have been big contiguous chunks, and he's kind of building that again now. Whereas, a lot of times I have four different neighbors, hunting the same deer as I do, and it just kind of changes the game. Your access is, different in those situations, um, things like that. And there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides, in my opinion. Those big farms, the deer are going to be there most likely, but they can be harder to kill in those bigger parcels. Where those smaller parcels, the deer may or may not be there, but when they are there, I think you're more likely to see them or get a shot. So there's advantages on both sides. I think you know, I think Bill has seen more success, like being a little more conservative, not necessarily going into some of the thicker bedding areas or, central parts of his spots or his farms where I've, maybe been less afraid to dive in at the right time. Again, I don't think one's better than the other. It's just kind of an example of different hunting styles, even though, I did learn a ton from him, in the time I spent hunting with him on his farm.
Sure, and that makes sense too. I mean, basically, the smaller the haystack, the easier you're going to find the needle if it is
Yeah,
there.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
theoretically, anyway.
yeah,
But I see always.
Well, and like mine too, that section next to me is untouched during bow season, but I got 1,500 acres of state land across the street, and so you get a lot of, deer get pushed around a lot too.
yeah.
So I mean, that can change how they act and how you hunt them. I mean, it can turn them nocturnal pretty quick at times too.
For sure, and it's magnified on the smaller pieces. That's just the reality of it. The deer typically don't know where those property lines are unless they're, crazy pressured in one spot and not in the other. They figure that stuff out pretty quick. But, for the most part, if you're hunting a smaller property, you just accept the fact that all your neighbors are going to also be hunting the same deer. It's just part of it, and also accept the fact that there's going to be periods of time where you're going to have no idea where that deer is.
And just
Yeah, exactly.
that's all part of it again,
For sure.
staying after it.
So jumping over to the monster buck portion of stuff. I know we're almost at an hour here. I don't want to keep you all night long here, but
Yeah, you're
could
good.
you kind of walk us through kind of you getting involved in that and kind of where what your ideas were or whatever to get that rolling?
Yeah, for sure. So, Monsterbuck and Elk Mountain Seed have been around. Well, I should say Elk Mountain Seed has been around for a long time. It's the parent seed house. Monsterbuck is the Foodplot division. And Monsterbuck existed for a while, just kind of as I would say, a subsidiary brand, just to have something in the food plot space. But I had been wanting to get into the food plot side of the industry for a long time. I really enjoy, like, getting back to what we were talking about earlier. I love the tinkering and experimentation of trying different things. And I had a buddy that was a guru in that. He just didn't necessarily have he had real world application experience, but nothing like what I have in the Midwest. So with his experience on species and what grows well together, and his knowledge of just plants and that type of stuff, I was able to work with him where he would create all these little, like, 10 by 10 test plots, where just to test what pairs well together, how things grow in different conditions, different soil types. And then I would take that and apply it to, my properties, my farms here in the Midwest. And we just got kind of tinkering back and forth with some of that. And I loved that process. I loved trying different things. One, seeing how well it grew together, but two, seeing how the deer respond to it. And how the plants respond to the deer too. Like, you can grow a test plot in your backyard and it will look good, but how does it respond to high deer density browse pressure and things like that. So we did that for a few years and kind of dialed in these blends that are now the new Monsterbuck blends. And I was at a time where I was trying to figure out, do I want to just keep these blends for myself, or launch these blends on my own, and just whoever wants to buy them and use them can, maybe create a small brand there, or do I go to a seed house like Elk Mound or Monsterbuck and work with a team and kind of overhaul the brand with those blends that I knew would do well in a lot of different situations throughout the country because we had tested them. So that's what I met with the guys from Elk Mound and ultimately decided to partner with them. They were open to me kind of overhauling all the blends to bring all these newer, more modern blends that are better for the browse pressure and different weather tolerances and things like that. And so that's what I decided to do, and that's kind of what we know Monsterbuck as now. This is what I think year 3 of having those new blends out there available to the public, and it's been really cool just to see guys come back, all the repeat customers that come back and share cool stories and success stories and things like that. So having quality seed and having Elk Mound kind of backing it from the history and the seed house standpoint is awesome. But we also are super confident in just what's in these blends, and obviously put them up against anything that's out there right now. So it's been a really fun process to go from like that kind of R&D time frame where you're just buying different seed species and putting them together to the finished product and getting to see the general public benefit from it too.
Yeah, I know. When I planted rut greens, it was the first time last year, and that stuff just blew my mind. I mean, my pH out here is not that great at all, and it floored me how well it grew versus other brassica blends that I had tried in the past.
Yeah.
I didn't really even think it. I was like, "What's going on?"
Yeah.
I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And the deer crushed
There's a lot of good, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of good stuff out there for sure, but there's also a lot of bad stuff. That was one of the things that really opened my eyes when I started diving into the food plot side of the industry. It's like there's some super low quality stuff, and it's hard as a general consumer. It's hard to figure out what's what. Like I said, there are some good brands, and that have really good seed and blends that make sense. And that's kind of the biggest thing when people ask me like what makes these Monsterbuck blends different. It's the blends make sense together. We didn't just throw 5 random clover varieties in a bag and call it a clover blend. Like, we were very specific about which varieties and what we put in there, what ratios, all that type of stuff. There's a lot of thought and experimentation behind that. especially, with my buddy testing all that type of stuff for years. So, and paying attention to things like university studies and just that entire process. So I'd say that's kind of the biggest selling point is just what's in the bag makes sense together in terms of how it grows, different maturity rates to make sure you try to minimize those hot and cold periods of food plots, and just the deer's attraction, trying to keep that attraction up, basically for as much of the hunting season and beyond if possible.
So going over to that, and I'm not sure if you've messed with it too much. I mean, obviously, I know you had to have done some stuff with the overcast blend.
Mm-hmm.
Have you tried that in mature corn, or just like maybe where there's like crop damage and stuff?
More where there's crop damage or on field edges where there's getting some sunlight in there. Um, part of it, part of it too depends on, are you talking corn that'll be standing throughout the entire, or are you talking about corn that's going to get harvested or combined?
It'll get combined.
Yeah. So that in that situation, yeah, in that situation, it can work. Some of it depends on the timing of when it gets combined too. And this is kind of the same with soybeans too. Like it's almost like you want to get ahead of harvest of that combine time, but you don't want the plants to get too mature, um, to where they're constant running over with the combine tires and the wagons and all that type of stuff. It's gonna, because of those younger brassicas and cereal grains, stuff like that will take that and they'll stand right back up. But if they reach a certain maturity level, it gets harder to survive some of that stuff. So your timing's pretty important there if you're talking about a field that's going to get combined. Um, Obviously, the soybeans, at that time of year are going to allow for a lot more sunlight to hit those young brassicas as they're growing than your tall shaded out corn is. But anytime anyone's doing overcast, I always recommend adding like 25 to 50 pounds of cereal grains with the overcast. Overcast is just, we should clarify for guys, overcast is just, there's no cereal grains in the actual overcast bag. So I always recommend adding 25 to 50 pounds of that. Cereal grains are pretty cheap. So add that to the overcast. Again, you're offering diversity there, but it's almost like that's kind of that fail safe. If you're going into corn, you end up not getting, or you don't time it right. Things like that. Those cereal grains are going to grow in a lot more conditions than almost any other species. So that's kind of your fail safe. But even if I'm going into the perfect situation, I'm broadcasting it when those soybean leaves are turning yellow, and I'm leaving the beans standing. I'm not worried about a combine going through. I'll still add cereal grains every time, for that diversity factor.
That's good to know because I've been kind of thinking about it and kicking it around on getting a bag of overcast. Either that or maybe trying the no huddle. Just trying something to where, because last year, lucky for me, not lucky for the farmer, but it was wet enough to where like the back corner,
Mm-hmm.
the corn kind of got drowned out. So I had a nice little open area that I could go and work up, and I put rut greens in there, and it did phenomenal. But now the corn, obviously, this year it's doing really good, and it's butted up all the way up against the timber that I'm hunting.
Yep.
So I'm kind of just looking for an option there to put something that I can have something green to hunt on when they do take that corn.
Yeah. The one thing I will say too, if you can pick a spot where the rows are oriented more north and south than east and west, you will have a little bit more sunlight getting into those. As that sun comes across, it's at least getting sunlight, whereas those east and west are pretty much gonna, be shaded out, that whole time. So that's another thing you can think about too, if you can kind of pick your spot. Again, I wouldn't be afraid to try it. You may not end up with your big bold brassicas, but you're still going to have some good, attractive green, leafy tops to work with, and plus your cereal grains if you're able to add those too.
Okay. That's good to know. I think I'm going to do that for sure.
Yeah.
Well, cool, man. You got any other
I
ones?
think I'm
It's
good.
kind of through the list that I had written down.
Awesome.
But...
No, I appreciate you guys' time. Enjoyed it. And I'm anxious to follow your guys' stories this year as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing how things pan out for you down there, and now hearing that you're going out west too for a little bit. That'll be cool to see. Hopefully you can get some footage when you're out there.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be here before we know it. That's for sure. I feel like there's a million things to do between now and then, but it's coming whether we're ready or not.
Yep. Well, cool, brother. I appreciate your time tonight.
Yes, thank you very much. Good talk.
Yeah, you guys as well. Best of luck, and yeah, let's do it again sometime.
All right, man. I'll
Sounds
talk
good.
to you later.
Thanks.
See ya.
Take it easy.
Well, that was pretty awesome. A lot of knowledge there.
A lot of knowledge. It was a good conversation. That was fun.
Super humble dude. Very very thankful that he's given us the opportunity to work with Monsterbucks and just to get to talk to him. And I mean, he's been a very successful, I think one of the most successful bow hunters in the recent days of in the content world type, again, he could walk around kind of on a high horse or something like some other people
but he's
do.
not that.
And
He
whatnot,
doesn't have that. He doesn't have that. He's just a down to earth, cool conversation. Yeah.
And knowledgeable when it comes to whitetails. So
yeah, it was glad to have him on. It was fun.
But yeah, we're gonna wrap this one up here. I can't really think of anything to add at this point in time.
No, I got some Foodplot stuff coming up. I got to do some work on yet. But other than that, start getting some stands set. Go start checking some stands. Get through all that stuff. And
a lot of shooting.
A lot of shooting. How's the shoulder feeling?
My shoulder hurts.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. I did something when I think it was when you were showing me that SRT system.
Yeah.
I think it was
fighting yourself there.
I think I was trying to push all my weight with my left arm, and something kind of popped when I lifted up. But it's better than it was yesterday.
Take it slow.
Yesterday it was pretty rough.
Do some of these and just do some exercises, and it'll help. Do them slow. It'll get you back in there.
That and pulling them other guys' bows back when that's so. I gotta put mine on a scale because mine's cranked, and if my string stretched that much, it's only the second year on that string.
You shot it quite a bit.
I did shoot it quite a bit, but man, it seems like mine is like pulling 50 pounds compared to theirs, and they said that theirs were set at 70.
Yeah, I didn't pull theirs back, but
yeah,
Well, I remember how much I struggled last year after I put new string on, so maybe that was my problem too. So.
Yeah, had a little string stretch there, only slinging about 63 pounds maybe or something. But no, thank our sponsors, Dialed Archery, Monsterbuck, Foodplot Seeds, Spartan Forge Mapping, and Lone Wolf Custom Gear. We'll see you guys next week.